Good evening. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu.
And I'm Scott Shafer. On tonight's show, we'll look at what's next for the Golden State Warriors, and we'll examine what's at stake in the upcoming Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage.
But we'll begin with a story about the women who clean the offices where you work and the stores where you shop. They often do their jobs alone at night for low wages. Those conditions have made them vulnerable to sexual harassment and assault. For the past 18 months, reporters from 5 news organizations, including KQED, have been investigating the abuse of immigrant women working in the janitorial service industry. This Tuesday night, Frontline will air a documentary on the investigation. Here's a clip from that film, Rape on the Night Shift.
Many janitors are women who work at night, in empty buildings, in isolation, and that can put them in danger.
Trabajar como janitor en la noche es muy pesado y muy riesgoso. Siempre anda uno solo, pues siempre anda uno cuidándose. Llegaba uno, se presentaba y le daban sus llaves y ya le decían a uno, te toca tal piso. A veces todo un piso o a veces 2.
Maria Bojorquez cleaned offices in San Francisco's iconic Ferry Building.
Siempre me tenía que reportar al supervisor. Empezó como primero a que uno le tuviera confianza. Primero empezó con halagos y después trataba como de agarrar algo, pero me rozaba los senos. O veces sí me los agarraba. Y veces yo le decía que me iba a quejar y me decía, no te van a creer. Yo decía, nunca va a llegar ese momento, pero llegó. En un descuido que me di, no sé cómo pasó todo, fue como segundos, todo rápido. Bueno, a mí se me hizo rápido y a la misma vez se me hizo largo. Y ya fue cuando él me forcejó, me tumbó y yo ya no supe. Yo no pensaba en nada.
What happened to Maria Bojorquez is not an isolated incident. According to the Department of Justice, there are more than 17,000 sexual assaults at work a year.
KQED, Univision, the Investigative Reporting Program at UC Berkeley's Journalism School, Frontline, and Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting have collaborated on this investigation. And joining me now to discuss their findings is reporter Bernice Yeung from Reveal. Bernice, welcome.
What? Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Let me ask you, first of all, who are the women holding these jobs?
These women, they are largely immigrant women from Latin America, China, the Caribbean. They're holding down low-wage jobs. They're working at night, often in isolation. Often they're single mothers, and they're just in a very financially precarious situation, sometimes undocumented immigrants, sometimes monolingual speakers, and just don't have the ability to sometimes raise some of the concerns that they have at work.
And so how do they find these jobs?
They largely rely through word of mouth often. There are various recruiting mechanisms, but the supervisors at the janitorial companies often use the word of mouth kind of system to locate new workers. And so sometimes you're working with your mother or your sister or your brother. It tends to go through kind of a word of mouth channel.
And during your reporting, were you able to figure out how prevalent is sexual abuse and sexual harassment of women janitors?
I think this is one of the one of the most challenging reporting questions that we encountered. Unfortunately, the government doesn't keep very good statistics related to this topic. 2/3 of sexual assault and rape victims don't even report the crime, so it's a very difficult issue to tabulate anyway. But what we do know is that the Department of Justice estimates that something around 50 people are sexually assaulted or raped at work every day.
And that's across the board? That
is across the board.
What do we know about the companies that hire these workers?
What we know is that some of them are very large, multi-billion-dollar entities. Some of them are actually quite small. The vast majority, 90% or so of the janitorial services companies are one-people enterprises or their family enterprises. They're quite tiny. So there's really a large range of companies out there. But what we do know about them is that they're kind of like the middleman. It's not like the situation that we had in the past where every building or every organization had their own janitor or their janitorial staff. Now it's you're going through a third party, and as a result, sometimes there's a lot of subcontracting that happens. And so, if you're a building owner, you've signed a contract with a cleaning company, but that cleaning company might have subcontracted it out many times over.
So several layers down. Is anyone doing anything to protect these workers? Are government agencies looking into this issue as well?
Well, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is one of the few government agencies that's looking at this issue in a proactive way. They are, once a complaint of sexual harassment comes to them, they will investigate and look into what's happening at a particular company and try to address it through various types of mediation, and then also, if it gets to it, sometimes litigation.
But a complaint or a claim has to be made first, so there's nothing preventive that they're doing.
That's right. That's right. You know, the Department of Labor could potentially, through some of its agencies, look at enforcement. They could go into some of the workplaces and do investigations, but this is nighttime work, night shift work, and so oftentimes these workers are off the radar of those enforcement organizations.
The women janitors you spoke to, what kinds of safeguards would they like to see put in place?
You know, some of them are pretty straightforward requests. They would like to see more female supervisors. They'd like to see an ability to work in a team setting, so more than one person at a time in an empty building. They'd really like to see day shift cleaning, for example, being able to clock in and clock out the same as everybody else in the office building.
And are there any independent organizations trying to help them?
Yes, because the government entities so far have not really taken a proactive role in terms of prevention. We did come across a really interesting organization down in Los Angeles. They have teams in various parts of the state of California, and they're launching something in Massachusetts. But they essentially send in ex-janitors into buildings to interact with workers during the night shift to tell them more about their rights, and if there's a problem, they will help them find the help that they need.
Okay. Well, thank you for shedding light on this issue. Bernice Yeung with Reveal at CIR. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can watch the Frontline documentary next Tuesday at 10 p.m. And now, on to same-sex marriage. California is one of 37 states where gay and lesbian couples can wed. Sometime in the next 2 weeks, the U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether every state should allow same-sex marriage. As you know, San Francisco City Hall has played a key role in this debate, and today is the celebration of that building's centennial. We're going to begin this segment with a look at the history of City Hall I-Dos.
They were the it couple of their time.
Romance that thrilled the world.
Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe may be the most famous couple to marry in San Francisco City Hall, a Beaux-Arts beauty where politics and passions meet.
I now pronounce you husband and wife.
And there are at least 38 couples who are married at San Francisco City Hall.
Per day?
Per day, Monday through Friday.
Oh my goodness.
Perhaps no one knows more about City Hall weddings than docent Ellen Schumer.
Well, how glorious
it must be to just walk through City Hall every day and you're surrounded by this.
Weddings. And if you look, you're also surrounded by children who participate in family weddings. It's amazing. It's truly a sign of love of each other in a building that promotes love.
When Mayor James "Sonny Jim" Rolfe first opened the doors of City Hall in 1915, he envisioned it as a palace for the people. Grant Cupid Munson was a county clerk at the time. He issued tens of thousands of marriage licenses over the course of his career. He was known for not standing in the way of a wedding, no matter what concerns were raised. In 1921, a vocal instructor, Ray Youngman, claimed he was forced to marry Enid Whittlesey, a former student, at gunpoint. According to the San Francisco Chronicle,
the father of Enid Whittlesey pointed a revolver at him, told him he had ruined his daughter, and demanded that he marry her. Youngman says he was too stunned by fear to say that he was already married, and he followed Whittlesey in a sort of trance. Judge Barnett says he noted nothing unusual in the ceremony, although Youngman appeared pale.
Weddings now fill City Hall's larger open spaces, but in years past, vows were exchanged in a judge's chamber.
The marriage of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio attracts a record crowd to the San Francisco court where the ceremony is performed.
There was a requirement, and you had to have a blood test. Well, there was a lady over there who could not keep a secret. And she was
leaked.
Yes, a big leak. And she called several reporters when Monroe and DiMaggio opened the door to Judge Perry's courtroom.
Congratulations, in which all movie lovers and baseball fans join.
Honestly, one of the best days of my life.
When Meg married Jeremy Latt at City Hall in 2012, it did not make headlines, but it marked a turning point in their lives, as Jeremy described it in a StoryCorps interview.
I had this much more romantic idea than, geez, I have cancer, let's get married.
Weeks after his diagnosis, a small group of friends and family gathered as the two exchanged vows.
We had the day perfectly planned out exactly as we wanted it. We had a limo, and the driver was just about the nicest guy in the world.
There was a lot happening at City Hall. There was a lot of hustle and bustle, but in the rotunda, time seemed to slow down, you know, while we were having our moment, and it was really neat. It was wonderful. That day, we had our whole lives in front of us. And, you know, Jeremy and I, being the planners that we were, we had already named our kids. We already had, you know, kind of an idea of what we wanted, what the next few years, 5 years, 10 years were going to look like. And we couldn't stop smiling and we couldn't stop kissing. And again, we were always very giddy and giggling, but that day especially, it was magical.
On a rainy Valentine's Day weekend in 2004, thousands of people who never thought they would be able to marry had their own magical City Hall weddings. They spent hours waiting in line to tie the knot after Mayor Gavin Newsom told the county clerk to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
I've waited a long time to do this part. With this ring, take your time, I thee wed. I thee wed. To be able to be married here in the rotunda of San Francisco City Hall is something I never dreamed would be possible.
With this ring. With this ring. I thee wed. I thee wed.
But 1 month and 4,027 weddings later, the same-sex ceremonies came to a halt. For 4 years, the legal battle continued until May 15, 2008, when California Supreme Court made same-sex marriage legal.
What a day in San Francisco! What a day in California! What a day for America! What a day for equality! And at the end of the day, make no mistake, this day is about real people and their lives. This is about Phyllis, Lyon, and Del Martin. Because that's where it started. 52 years of love and devotion and constancy and faith in one another.
The weddings were put on hold in November 2008 when California voters passed Proposition 8, banning same-sex marriage. Another lengthy court battle ensued. Then in June 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court cleared the way for same-sex marriages in California to resume. Looking down on the celebrations, sculptor Henry Crenier's Goddess of Equality.
She is holding the equilateral triangle in her hand. I think she now has a smile on her face.
But not all City Hall weddings have a fairy tale ending. A teary Marilyn Monroe announced her intention to divorce Joe DiMaggio just 9 months after they married. And the hope for the future that filled Meg and Jeremy Latt on their wedding day faded as his treatments began to fail.
It's hard enough to imagine the life that I'm currently living as being my actual life. It just seems like a Kafka-esque kind of story. Like I woke up one day and I was a cockroach. And I've been a cockroach for about a year now, and it's pretty hard to accept that that's actually what I am.
Happy birthday to you.
2 months after his 32nd birthday and 2 years after they married, Jeremy died with Meg by his side.
I always joked that he was going to be an old man with me, but now, you know, I think about how I'll be an old woman with a picture of a young man.
Meg says she thinks of Jeremy each time she walks by City Hall.
And I think how lucky I was to have had this great love. I know not everybody gets to have that.
And she takes solace knowing her wedding was part of the rich history of San Francisco City Hall.
We did not have a chance to have children, and so we don't have a living legacy. And to be part of history is something that I know he would be very excited about.
I love you.
I love you too.
How much?
All of it.
June is Pride Month, and many gay and lesbian couples may stop by City Hall to tie the knot. Joining me now to discuss the case before the Supreme Court is Kate Kendall, Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Hi, Kate.
Hello, Scott.
First of all, what is the Supreme Court going to decide?
Well, hopefully they're going to decide a ruling that will end the discussion of marriage nationwide, and we will have marriage in every single state. There are two questions that the court is dealing with. The first is it a violation of constitutional principles to not recognize the freedom to marry for same-sex couples? And question two, is it permissible for states to not recognize validly married couples who move to that state from a state where they got married? If we win on question one, they don't even get to question two. I'm hoping, we're all hopeful, fingers crossed, that we will win on question one, and by the end of June, we'll be celebrating.
Now, here in California, we already have same-sex marriage. So what's at stake for people who live here?
Well, for folks who live here, it means the rest of the country is open to you. You can get transferred to a job in Mississippi and you'll be okay. Your family will be recognized and respected. It means that family members, wherever we are, we're one country again. We're not 50 different countries or 37 legally. Good states, you know, and 13 bad states. We will finally be united, and our country will be in a much better place for everyone.
You know, the courts decide the law, of course, but then there's, you know, there's hearts and minds as well.
Well, there's no doubt. This could be our Brown versus Board of Education moment, or this could be the moment where we win suffrage as the women's movement. But to actually win full liberation and justice for our community, it has to be moving people to care not just about marriage, but to care about violence against transgender people, or to care about immigration, or to care about economic security or employment discrimination. But this will be a really important high water mark.
You know, you think back 11 years, 2004, people lined up, my partner and I lined up at City Hall, thousands of couples over the course of 5 or 6 weeks to get married. And you remember that was a presidential election year, and some people, including Dianne Feinstein, were angry at Gavin Newsom because, you know, the Democrats lost Ohio. And now fast forward to today, that one of those cases before the U.S. Supreme Court is from Ohio. Yep. Kind of interesting that we're coming full circle.
Well, the full name case, the Obergefell was one of the partners. His partner was the partner who died shortly after they got legally married. And the state of Ohio would not put the marriage on the death certificate, would not recognize him as a husband on the death certificate. So it's those sorts of insults that we're going to finally solve. But you're right, the lightning speed with which
Did you ever think you'd see it that quick?
Never thought I'd see it this fast.
Yeah. So this decision, the decision that comes down, is not going to answer all questions, even for gay and lesbian couples, right? I mean, there are parental questions, for example, that may be left unanswered or not.
That's really one of the most important things I want people to remember. Even though we'll be celebrating, we are so not done with the multitude of issues that impact the lives of LGBT people. And even with marriage, that will not make families secure. There is still parental recognition that is very, very much going to be an open question in many states. So we'll have our work cut out for us.
Well, then there's a job discrimination, right? You can still be fired in
most states.
In most states. So is there a way in which the Supreme Court could answer the questions on marriage so broadly that some of these other policies that are discriminatory could also fall, or is that not likely?
I think the only way that would happen is if they applied heightened scrutiny to any law that classifies based on sexual orientation. I'm not sure I see even a 5-4 ruling in our favor or a 6-3 ruling in our favor giving us the highest level of constitutional scrutiny. But you know what it does, Scott, and you know this as well as anyone, it does help set a tone for the place of our humanity and the place of LGBT people in this culture that I think will ripple for sure to other issues.
Do you think that, you know, some people, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, talked about the Roe v. Wade decision and how it came too quickly and it never really settled the question for a lot of people, abortion. Are you concerned at all about that here?
I'm not concerned a bit. The latest polls show that over 60% of the American public is with us. I also think that sexual orientation is a unique issue. It's not like abortion. It's not even really like race. Because LGBT people are everywhere, we are in every family. And you love us before you know we're gay. And then you have to come to terms with your concerns about that.
The value of coming out, as Harvey Milk said. All right,
Absolutely.
Kate Kendall, thanks so much. We'll know in about within 10 days.
In 10 days, we will.
All right, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
A huge party in Oakland today. The Golden State Warriors and their fans celebrated the team's first NBA championship in 40 years with a parade and rally. Dub Nation, that's the nickname for the Warriors' ardent fan base, jammed the streets around Lake Merritt. The celebration may be bittersweet for Oakland. The Warriors are planning to move to San Francisco for the 2018 season. Joining me to talk about the Warriors season this year and what's next for the team is Rick Tittle with 95.7 The Game. Rick, first of all, you were at the parade today. What was it like?
Well, it was a surreal experience. It was absolutely gorgeous weather. And I just, think about this is probably never going to happen again. The first one's always the biggest and the best. I mean,
why do you say it's never going to happen again?
Because, well, I mean, at this scale, because the Giants' 2010 one was just mayhem and it got relatively smaller. So this first one is very special. An entire generation of fans that has never seen success like this. And it really got to show off how beautiful downtown Oakland is, especially from the aerial shots. There aren't too many cities that have a downtown lake that beautiful. And I'm sure there are a lot of people around the country that were surprised by that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the coach, Steve Kerr, rookie coach, although he now has 6 NBA rings because he played with 5 winning teams. But talk about him and what made him so special. What did he give the Warriors that they didn't have?
Well, there are a lot of things. First of all, he has nothing to prove outside of could he coach. He played, as you said, in the NBA, Final Four in college with Arizona, great executive with Phoenix, also a broadcaster, accomplished broadcaster as well. He really had nothing to prove. He had great temperament. He's a fantastic communicator. He got veterans to sit on the bench and come off the bench, but also offensively, Mark Jackson had them playing defense the last couple of years, but Steve Kerr got them to play offense, pass the ball around, just a couple more passes a little bit. You could see it from their first game in preseason. But Steve Kerr, for the most part, he was able, his people skills were almost better than his X's and O's.
Yeah, high emotional intelligence, I think they said. Talk about the chemistry on this team, and he had a lot to do with that. These players seem to really like each other and get along. Is that your impression from covering the games?
They do like each other a lot, and you could even see it at the parade today, the little whispers here and there. They weren't too cliquish. You could even see on the plane their Coco song that they would all sing together. And when their figurehead is a pretty selfless guy in Steph Curry, I think that sort of breathes down through the coaching staff, through their star player. There weren't a lot of big egos to go around.
It's a young team for the most part, but there may be some changes. That always happens as much as you want to keep a winning team together. As you look down, what players do you think may leave this team?
Well, David Lee and his agent have made no secret that they want to get out. They want to go somewhere else and start, and the Warriors are going to accommodate them. The Warriors,
he's an all-star.
He's a previous all-star with both the Knicks and the Warriors as well. He's probably out. And then there's some other guys that might go out, like maybe a Barbosa, you know, the McAdoo's and Kuzmiches of the year might go as well. But for the most part, I mean, losing Alvin Gentry, he's sort of their offensive coordinator. He'll be head coach of the Pelicans. I think they'll be all right. The core, though, is going to remain. And they do have a first-round pick. They'll probably draft for it depth. You're not going to get a starter on the World Championship team at the 30th pick.
And they're going to have to re-sign Draymond Green, right?
Draymond Green is restricted, but yeah, he's going to get paid, as they say. They're going to have to get creative, but he will get paid.
When you look at this team, of course, you mentioned, you know, the Giants' huge success over the last 5 years. Do you see anything in common with the teams, starting with the ownership and the management?
Well, the one thing about Lacob that I will give him credit for is
Joe Lacob, one of the owners.
Yes, Joe Lacob, the owner of the team, is that he wanted to make it a first-class organization. And one thing that I appreciate about the Giants is that when they came into Candlestick, they didn't bleat about how horrible it was. They put in a tartan track, they put in real bleachers, they put in real dugouts, they put in a foghorn. They said, we're going to make this as fun as possible until we get our stadium. And so they sort of took the longer approach to it. And I think that's something that Lacob did. We don't want to say, hey, we wish we were like the Lakers, we wish we were like the Spurs. They said we're going to make this a first-class organization. And so I guess in a way you could say that. You know?
We mentioned that the team is planning to leave the city for San Francisco. Are you hearing any grumbling from the city? I mean, it was sort of a bittersweet moment, as I said, at the top there.
Well, as you know, in California, you're not going to get anything done with public money. And San Francisco barely lifted a finger for the Giants. And the only way they're getting it done now is because they bought their own land. And now there are still grumblings about the traffic. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea to move where they're moving. They have a perfectly good stadium, refurbished, centrally located, BART station, and they want to spend $1 billion to move 8 miles away. It makes zero sense to me.
It's tough in San Francisco to get things done, but they're gonna try. Rick Tittle from 95.7 The Game. Thanks so much.
All right, great to be with you.
Go Dubs. Well, for all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org. I'm Scott Shafer. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night.